DealQuest listeners, I am so excited to have Dom Einhorn on an upcoming episode of DealQuest. Dom, you've had so much experience in terms of deals and, in the past and what you've done in your own companies and the incubator that you have now. Tell people a little bit about what they're going to hear on the upcoming episode of DealQuest.
Thank you, Corey, for having me. I think what you can discover is that it's not necessarily a great idea to build your business in a large metropolitan area or a big city. In fact, if you believe that the internet is the great equalizer, we should probably be able today to build our next startup on the moon or soon on Mars. So if I take you to the southwest of France, it's probably not that much of a stretch.
I love it. Yeah, so we're definitely going to have about that. And then, Dom sold more than two, but we talk about two companies in the past. And we talk a little bit also about how you help companies, but also just in terms of investment in general, right? And what companies need to look for and how they should position themselves.
Yeah, correct. Obviously what we do is we help, we incubate and accelerate startups in the technology space, but we also work hand in hand with angel investors and angel networks that are looking, for the right type of startup to invest in. And one of the problems we're looking to solve is to, fix the gap that that's still very present today between investors looking to fund startups and startups looking for funding.
So folks, if you're interested in hearing more about that or how Dom had at least two companies come to him looking to buy the two of the companies that he sold without even, shopping them or pitching them, just check out Dom Einhorn's episode on DealQuest.
Do you want your business to grow faster? Are you open to new and out-of-the-box ways to drive revenues and increase value? How do you imagine the most successful entrepreneurs and business leaders double, triple, or expand their businesses tenfold or more? The answer is Deals. This is a weekly podcast featuring conversations with business owners, executives, and leaders as we reveal behind-the-scenes details that give you, our listeners, the confidence to pursue your own deal-driven growth. On the show, we discuss a huge variety of deals, everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My name is Corey Kupfer, and I've been supporting deal-driven growth for businesses for 35 years as a successful entrepreneur, professional negotiator, and attorney. My goal is to help you strategize, plan for, find, and complete deals that will help your company grow faster. Welcome to the DealQuest Podcast. Let's get started.
A serial entrepreneur with multiple startup exits under his belt, Dom Einhorn created the first online art auction back in March of 1996, which was acquired by one of the largest auction sites in the world 5 months later. He then created PowerClick, a digital marketing agency with 500 plus advertisers as clients. The agency merged with a publicly listed company in the spring of 2001 in an 8-figure M&A transaction. Today, he advises and invests in a wide range of technology startups. A native of Alsace, Dom speaks 6 languages and understands the importance of breaking down language barriers. The same philosophy applies to his businesses. In 2018, he returned to France and settled in. You got to help me with the pronunciation there, Dom.
Salah.
Salah. With a single focus to build the world's largest rural incubator-accelerator, UNIQORN. And we're going to hear more about that. The digital startup ecosystem and angel investing represent Dom's true passion. As an investor, he has provided seed funding for over 20 technology startups. And as an entrepreneur, he has managed client campaigns with budgets exceeding $3 billion, delivered 7 million plus in sales leads, and generated over 500 million in sales as a Power affiliate. So listen, the rest of his bio is going to be in the show notes. He's even founded a recent tech conference. But as you can see, between the sale of his first company, the merger of a second company, the incubator that he runs, the investments he does, he is just a perfect guest for the DealQuest podcast. Dom Einhorn, thank you so much for being here. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Corey. My pleasure.
So before we talk about all this wonderful deal experience and what you're doing now, I want to take you back to when you were a little kid growing up, maybe 8, 10, 12 years old. What did you want to be? Because my guess is it probably wasn't, a serial entrepreneur and an investor, but you tell me, maybe I'm wrong.
No, not by a long shot. Growing up, I wanted to be like my dad. My dad was a Pretty boring job, actually. And now in hindsight, he was an employee of the French Railways. He was an engineer for the French Railways. That's who I wanted to be. I guess I just wanted to emulate who he was. And obviously, my trajectory was significantly different from his.
I love it. I love it. And what was your first deal of any type that you can remember? It could be something small when you were a kid or later as you're an adult, just whatever comes to mind.
It was very similar to a newspaper route, but for me, it was a magazine route. Okay. And it was actually, I think that's kind of like what gave me an idea of becoming an entrepreneur, because we were, donating all our time. As kids, I grew up in a Catholic family. My mom taught catechism for 56 years, and we were always asked to do these chores for everybody else. It seemed endless. And then at one point in time, there came this concept of this religious calendar, annual calendar, for which we're getting commission for every issue that we sold.
Okay.
And I was working tirelessly day and night, and I outsold everybody else.
I love it.
First time I was getting compensated for something, I was, donating my time towards without actually earning a dime.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So, at some point that spark turns into, we talked about in your bio, you're a serial entrepreneur, and then you create this online art auction. Actually, before we go there, why don't you just give people, we're going to circle back to it, but just give them, just a minute on what you do now, where you focus your time, because I know you have a few things going on.
Sure. A couple of major focuses today, and they're actually aligned one with the other. Back in 2018, I came back to France roughly 2.5 years ago to launch UNIQORN. That's UNIQORN with a Q. My last name in German, Einhorn, means unicorn as well. So play on words, the dual play there. And we're roughly 30 people today on the UNIQORN side. And we incubate and accelerate technology startups in the fields of artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, fintech, digital media, slowly agri-tech as well, because we are in a rural area. But first and foremost, I'm more an investor today than an entrepreneur. Provide seed capital for deals that I believe in, and that deals that ultimately get incubated and accelerated via UNIQORN.
Great. All right. So now I want to take you back to this art auction company, online art auction company that you created. First of all, the thing I noticed, it's 1996 and it's an online art auction company, which is, I remember the mid 90s and, the earlier, days of the internet, before, of course, the bubble, burst the first time. So you create this art auction site, in fact, one of the largest in the world, and then you sell it 5 months later. I mean, that's a pretty quick turnaround. Talk to me about that sort of journey and experience. Was the speed of that, somewhat, I mean, I'm sure it was related to your skill and all the great things you did, but it was also, was it sort of related to the time and how hot the market was? Talk to us about the trajectory of that and how you prepped it for a deal. Were you shopping it? Did somebody come to you? How did that all come about?
Sure. It was a very, very interesting story. So at that point in time, I'd say between 1993, when I first launched in the business, and 1996, I had a lot of artists as clients, painters, photographers, sculptors, and they had one thing in common. They were all starving, including myself, right? So we're all starving artists. I was a starving, budding digital marketer, entrepreneur. And the very reason why I decided to actually build the first online art auction is because I wanted to solve a fundamental problem. And that problem was the fact that I had these great artists that I always respected tremendously because I can't draw a hammer. So I've always been fascinated by art, and I wanted to really help them get a name for themselves and actually promote themselves and sell some of their pieces. And on a one-off basis, that was very difficult. We were looking for something more scalable, and I figured, why not an auction? Why would we have auctions that are, for some of them, very successful in the offline world? Why can't we transpose that in the online world? We did. We spent about 6 months building the code. We launched one day. There was very little activity for the first 2.5 months. And lo and behold, one major magazine that used to be 300 pages thick back in the 90s and is a leaflet today came and did a report on us, glorifying what we do and how innovative it was. And we went from 150 bidders to 20,000 in the span of a week.
Wow.
And overnight, we ended up being in the art business, of which we knew nothing about, turned out, right? We knew how to promote, we knew how to market, but we had no idea about fulfillment. So we were shipping art uninsured. We were shipping art under glass. Glass would break. I mean, again, we were up 3, 4 in the morning with orders flowing in, and we tried to fulfill to our best, and it ended up being a nightmare on the logistics side. And one day we got a knock on our door, and it was a virtual knock. It was an email at first, and someone wanted to buy the database from us and take the site away from us for what was a nice fee. And I figured, look, it's probably the perfect time to get that monkey off our back, make a few bucks, and do something else.
Love it. So they approached you because you had gotten some traction, some press, that kind of stuff. Was this a buyer that had that kind of logistics and infrastructure in place that the company needed?
Very much so. They were very strong there. Our weakness was their strength, and vice versa, I shall say. They were early on in what they were doing, and they could certainly use a lot of the registered users that we had that were very engaged in our platform.
And as part of that structure, did you or any of your other major team members need to stay on for a period of time? Or was it just really the sale of the database?
It was a 6 months. So it was primarily a sale, right? Okay. So during the 6-month period of time, we did very little post the first 2 months. Once they had the intimate knowledge of the inner workings of our platform, it went very fast from there on.
Yeah, so it was really just a 6-month consulting, whatever, just make sure that the transition was smooth.
It was a flipper.
Yeah, love it. Well, that's great. So any lessons that you learned from that deal, or was either positive or negative?
I would say the fundamental lesson I learned from that, which still sticks with me today, is whatever you're launching, make sure the product or service that you're developing provides a bona fide answer to an existing problem.
Yes.
I think that's very, very important, because as a result of technology democratizing and demonetizing, what I've seen, for example, is a dramatic shift. A major difference between the 90s and today is it would cost an arm and a leg to launch, as you know, Corey. In the 90s, unless you'd raise $500,000 or $1 million, you had no point being in business as a technology business. My bandwidth bill in 1998 was $8,000 a month, and I used 1,000 times less bandwidth than today. Right? That's one example.
Right.
So what I see today, mostly as an investor, is very often young entrepreneurs that, by way of being passionate about what they do, tend to create the problem they ultimately intend to resolve. That's clearly not sustainable. We could have never done that in the 90s because it was just too darn expensive to go down that route, right? So you see a lot of these vanity business models that are popping up, where you're sometimes wondering, what does this even do? Why do I need another social network, right? Why do I need another way to search? Because I'm very satisfied with the search results that Google provides me. Yet you still have these companies that are popping up left and right that have no chance of survivability whatsoever. So I think the biggest lesson is focus on solving a problem that's affecting a lot of people. If you want to become a billionaire, help a billion people, and the rest will happen by itself.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I never wanted to be one of these guys who's like, well, back in my day, I try to it's always evolving, and and it's always changing, and the benefits and detriments. But I do remember. I mean, in the mid '90s, I built out a new law office. And I remember we were still, I paid all kinds of money, tens of thousands of dollars to have the office wired, and we had a server room, and and then when I in 2015, actually no, I take it back. That was even 2005. It wasn't even the mid 90s. I mean, still in 2005, right? You were 40, 50, 60 grand in, and just hardware and wiring for a small law office, right? For a space with 8 offices. And then in 2015, 10 years later, it was $500-600 a month in cloud programs and a couple of laptop computers, and you're up and running.
I mean, if you look at the late 90s, early 2000s, if you wanted to launch an e-commerce venture back then, you needed an Oracle server license.
Right.
That would set you back $32,000 per instance. We were running 5 at a time. So I mean, unless you raise that cash, there's no point being in business. It was the barrier of entry was extremely high on the financing side.
Yeah, it's interesting. And somewhat like the great thing about today is that it's really inexpensive to get into business. The bad thing about today, it's really inexpensive to get into business, right? It's it cuts both ways. I mean, it depends on what you're right. I mean, there's not a natural economic gatekeeper, which in ways provides more opportunity for more people. Especially people that don't, let's say, come from means who have major connections up front, which is a great thing. But it also doesn't create a natural vetting process. So you get a lot of these, like you said, Vanity and other places that really don't solve any problems.
Without a doubt. I think what you're seeing is obviously the explosion of entrepreneurship across the world, especially in the tech space. The tech space in the 90s, unless you were in Silicon Valley, nobody would believe in you. You wouldn't even get backing. I had people, even though I was in LA at that time, people that said, you need to move. In order for us to write you a check, you need to be in the Bay Area. I was like, seriously?
Right.
I mean, isn't this exactly the opposite of what the internet's supposed to be? The great democratizer, right? And what you're seeing today, you see kids, my wife's Vietnamese, so when you go to Vietnam, you see Walmart-sized co-working spaces with kids building mobile games left and right, some of which are worth $1 billion plus today.
That's right. That's right.
Completely.
And it took a while. Because even when it moved beyond Silicon Valley, you had Silicon Alley, in Massachusetts, and then you had a couple other, in more recent times, you got like Austin, Texas, some other places, but there were still these hubs where you almost had to be, and I think it's only somewhat recently that and even now you still hear people say you should be here or there. I think we're still in the midst of that change where it's truly becoming more democratized, and and you don't have to be geographically in one of those ecosystems.
Yeah, I think we're going back to the garage where it all started, right? The only difference is that actually today it is happening in the garage. The rest was glorified, with HP, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, they probably spent the first week in the garage and then they moved to an office, right?
Right.
But they led us to believe that they were spending, 3-4 years in the garage, and ultimately they outgrew that garage. I mean, it's a fallacy to believe that was the case, but today it's actually the case.
That's right. And that's really, I mean, you running a successful, robust incubator in rural France, is really a symbol of that, right?
No question. I mean, one thing we didn't understand, that was, mind you, before COVID, we did a study before COVID, commissioned a study, and we realized that 12% of young startup entrepreneurs wanted to move away from large metropolitan areas in order to launch their ventures. I was actually shocked by that number. I thought it would be 2, 3, 4%, and it was 12 before COVID. Today, in Europe, I'm not sure what the numbers are in the US, probably not that far off. 38% of those same entrepreneurs want to operate outside of a big city.
Yeah.
I think we finally come to the realization that, number one, it can be done. Number two, it should probably be done. So if you take some examples, because at one point in time between 2006, 2009, I had a large office in Panama in Central America with over 100 people. And 2 of my best engineers 2 years ago relocated to France. When they were still in Panama, they were commuting 3.5 hours a day to and from the office.
Right.
Today, they walk to the office, 5-minute walk. They drop off the kids at school on the way to the office. They pick them up on the way home. They don't even realize what's happening. It's like, wow, I never believed this could actually be done, right? I have probably 6-7 employees that walk 30 to 45 seconds to get to the office. They live on the same street where the office is located. And what you're seeing is obviously this dramatic increase in quality of life that also permeates the organization. People are just happier, they're refreshed, they're not as tired, they have a smile on their face when before they didn't.
And it was really interesting to me, Dom, is that you would think that would be more likely in the entrepreneurial community, and it is, but You're seeing that even, in very big companies, right? I mean, a lot of the big tech companies have basically said to people, you never have to come back to the office. You work remotely, if you want. And then, it's also becoming a criteria. I mean, I interviewed, I've been in discussions with some attorneys right now. I'm interviewing a few people to add an attorney to my firm. And, one of them said, hey, I see, you have offices in Manhattan and Rybrook, New York. That's a long commute for me. And he said, I really don't want to go back to doing that. I used to do that. And like, people aren't like, they're much less afraid to say something like that, right? Like, like people would not bring that up in a potential interview. And of course, for me, I was able to say to him, listen, we didn't really promote it, but we've been working virtually for 6 years. We didn't miss a beat during COVID. He's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Like, that'd be great.
It's almost ironic, back in the days, people say you better show up at the office. Now they're telling you exactly the opposite. You better stay home, right? Exactly. whatever you do, don't come to the office.
Don't go to the office. Exactly. So, all right. So let's go back now to talk about PowerClick, because that is another company you built significantly, and then you had an 8-figure M&A on that. So tell us a little bit about that company and the journey to its sale as well.
Yeah. So that was initially a company that I actually felt was failing at first, because again, we were very early on. We tried to build digital marketing strategies, in particular customer acquisition campaigns between 1996, 1999, 2000, when for the first 2 or 3 years, we almost had no traction. And at one point in time, I was ready to throw in the towel. And that's when things started accelerating a little bit. And then, as you remember, 99, party like it's 99. There's a reason why everybody says that. We literally exploded, right? We had a leg up on the competition. We had built some campaigns that had gotten traction for some large financial companies, financial services industry primarily, and then later on in the travel industry. And, we went from a handful of clients to 100 to 200, ultimately 500 companies. And we were growing so fast that at one point in time, we literally ran out of money. I didn't pay attention, right? We were burning through cash and just growing, by double digits every single month. And there was one Friday afternoon where I just realized, wow, I'm not going to be able to make payroll this weekend.
Yeah.
So okay, let me do some creative math here. I'm clearly going to be the one that's not getting paid.
Yes.
Let me see if I can pay everybody else. And I was still somewhat short. And then through my glass window, my secretary, because at that time we still had secretaries,
right,
waved to me, pick up the phone, because my phone was always on silent, so not to be interrupted. So pick it up. And on the other line, there was a gentleman who introduced himself, and he said, I'm such and such, and I'm calling you today because I want to buy your company. I'm like, it's Friday afternoon, like 2:33 p.m. I'm like, sir, I'm not sure where you found out about me, but my company's not for sale. And he tells me everybody's for sale for the right price. That, well, that may be true, but I'm still not for sale. Right? And he goes, I tell you what, young man, those are his exact words. I know where you are. You're in North Hollywood. I'm down by Long Beach. How about I send my driver up to pick you up and we talk about it? I'm like, I tell you what, older man, I'm an adult. I have my own car. If you really want to meet, I'll drive down and meet you. Where are you? But it might take me a little while, because Friday afternoon in LA could take me 2 hours to go from North Hollywood to Long Beach.
Sure.
Ultimately, he said, I'll be here until 9 p.m. Feel free to drop by whenever you want. I went down to see him. Again, he said, I want to buy your company. I said, look, let's take a step back. What is it that interests you? And they were building a device that was a same as cash transaction device that connected via USB to your computer back in the time, that would allow card present transactions. You would actually swipe your credit card.
Yeah.
So they were very strong on the hardware side, but it did not have the merchant relationships, all of which we had. Right. And we also had already some very early data at that point in time in terms of volumes of transactions, where they would come from, et cetera, et cetera. So now I get it. It makes sense. Ultimately, I told him I was still not for sale. And then he did something that was very, very interesting. He opened up a drawer and he put a check in front of me and he goes, I tell you what, why don't you take this home think about it over the weekend, and we speak early next week. And I was glancing at the check. And I said, yeah, tell you what, you have a deal? I'll talk to you on Monday. I rushed to the bank because I needed to make payroll. And then because it was a pretty sizable check, it was pretty funny because I was young in my 20s, in my early to late 20s, mid to late 20s, and went to the teller at back then CalFed, California Federal, which doesn't exist anymore, merged later on with Washington Mutual and became Chase. And I handed him this big check, and the teller gives me the roll of the eyes, walks back to the branch manager. He gives me the roll of the eyes, and he comes up to the window and he goes, sorry, we can't clear this entire amount today. He said, I don't need the entire amount. How about 10, 20,000? So they cleared 10, 20,000. I made payroll, and ultimately I sold them the company 6 months later.
Wow. So there's so much in that. I mean, the first thing is just the general entrepreneurial lesson where, you probably see this with some of the startup entrepreneurs that you incubate now, whatever, where, especially, first time around, they don't usually think about the issue of running out of cash when things are going well. They focus on the issue of running out of cash if they don't do well, right? But people, especially tech companies and other industries where there's fast growth, it's so easy to underestimate the need for capital when things are going well and the difference between profit and cash flow.
Yeah, I mean that's absolutely critical. So if I remember back then, I would take anything that would drive revenue. I would bring on.
Yeah.
I was young. I was naive, and I wasn't. Today, I'm doing the exact opposite. I'm turning down 9.9 deals out of 10. I'm looking for profit margins first and foremost because I've been bitten by that snake in the past. I don't look at top line revenue at all. I just look at pure operating margin. I look at margin in general first and foremost.
Yeah, the other no question. And listen, we've all sort of go on that learning journey and figure it out. The other thing that I heard, in both of your sales, which were really interesting, is that in both cases the buyers came to you, and for me that's a great lesson, right? Because I just did an episode of the podcast with Dr. Sabrina Starling, and we were talking about something in a very different context, but the principles apply. She has a new book out talking about how you hire A players and getting team in place, and we talked about we tied it into deals on how important building a great team and be able to scale and creating enterprise value. But one of the things that she said is that, the best companies don't start looking for people when they have an opening, because then you're going to get all the people who, don't have jobs and are on the job boards or whatever. And not that some of those people may not be good, but the ratio, of success is less high because A players tend to leave one opportunity for another. They usually don't have, they're much less likely to have a gap in their employment. So, she was talking about the fact that you've got to always be out there building relationships, having the pipeline open even when you don't need somebody, so that one, you become attractive, two, you have the relationships, and three, you're not in sort of a desperate position. Similarly with companies that are looking to either raise money or get acquired, if you are, you happen to frankly get a little lucky there, right? On the day you couldn't make payroll, somebody came in and but in a way, like the timing was fortuitous and it seems lucky, but what wasn't lucky, what was underlying that is that you built something that had value. It might not have, fully monetized in the marketplace yet, but you had that access that they were looking for, right? You had a piece of value in the marketplace that an acquirer not only would, was valuable, but they actually sought you out for that. And, it was similar in your first company, right? So to be able to build something up front that is attractive to others, as opposed to having to be out there shopping desperately for a buyer or money when you're desperate, is a big difference in terms of the kind of deals you get done.
Yeah, I agree. I think that to build something with the intent of selling it or flipping it has never even crossed my mind. Right. in my life. So I'm as an entrepreneur, if you're a true blue entrepreneur, you're looking at creating value. And that value needs to be there, whether or not you ultimately pass it on to someone else or not.
Yes.
So if you're actually focused on solving a problem, a fundamental problem, I don't think the question even comes up. There are always people out there that will be looking for you because they have that pain point, that friction point that you may have solved for them already. So I've never gone in, and I've had all the other exits in my life. Never once have I gone out proactively looking for a buyer. For me, that actually feels like a flawed strategy.
Yeah.
Let's take a break from the show for a minute so I can invite you to a new way to determine your deal readiness. I created a fast and easy assessment that will determine exactly how deal ready you are. Once you complete the assessment, I use your responses to identify the obstacles that are holding you back from being a deal-driven growth genius. It's as easy as heading to CoreyKupfer.com/assessment. That's CoreyKupfer.com/assessment and filling out a few multiple choice questions. I'll be checking in after the episode to see what your results are. Now back to the show.
Let me flip it on you a little bit here, because you now mainly invest in other companies and help incubate them. And as my guess is it's different for you. You're seed investor, early stage investor. You're helping incubate these companies, so you obviously know not only the level of risk, but you also getting to know them in another way. You're not just bringing money to the table. You bring strategy and connections and all that kind of stuff. But for some investors, especially let's say, some VC funds and things like that, I'm not saying they don't bring other things to the table, but they also have certain other pressures to get returns on that investment, right? Because they have a fund and they got to, the fund may close at some point. They promise their investors certain returns that sometimes create some pressure on entrepreneurs to scale, to exit, to IPO. And so I want to get your view in the investment world about that potential tension versus the idea of just being able to build value, without worrying about some of these other incentives.
Yeah, I think what you're seeing today, especially in the venture space, is that the problem that they face is significantly different than the problem that I face as an angel investor, as an incubator, is because for them to make it worth their while, they have to be able to allocate a very, very large amount of capital. So you see them move in at the B, C, D, E level, right? Where historically they've came in much earlier in the game. What makes us more nimble, and actually where I think that to a certain extent, some of the larger VC firms are today missing the point and missing the real opportunity, is because some of these deals, actually a lot of these deals, take for example in the tokenization industry, in the crypto space, they go from nothing to $1 billion in a matter of months, right? Because they scale so fast that, and they actually don't need the capital because they scale so fast, because they're more nimble. It costs a lot less. They have great cash flow for some of them. With earlier ICOs, yes, there were a lot of scams. Today, there are a lot of tokens, utility tokens or security tokens that are very successful. What you see in that space, for example, is by the time a VC would be interested in it, the deal is already gone. It's already popped, right? The only lick you're going to get off that deal with large money is if it decides to list publicly, and sometimes they don't need that either, because technically speaking, if they have a cryptocurrency, they are already public in some shape or form, right? What we're able to do is we're able to zero in on our area of specialty with like surgical precision. I'm not saying we're not going to fail, right? Sure. But because we have a direct impact on the scalability of the deal itself, because we're providing it with this ecosystem, like this nurturing ecosystem where we can identify their weaknesses and their friction points and help them along the way, we can usually, hence the term incubator, we can usually ensure the survivability of that venture in the early stages, and then in the acceleration process, making sure they can scale very, very rapidly. Because most of these ventures, as you know, they fail very, very quickly, and ever more so quickly today. Usually if you put some pressure on them, they will just crack within a few months, within 3 to 6 months, because they don't raise a lot of capital like they used to. So they burn a lot less cash, and not having that cash at their disposal actually precipitates either the success or the failure.
Yes. Yes. So I'm sure some of the companies that you work with, though, do get to the point where they want, where they're raising additional capital and they're going, past the seed and friends and family in the seed round, and they are going to more larger VC type funds. What's and I'm sure because of the role you play with the companies early on, not only providing some seed capital but also the incubation and advice and connections, you become a trusted advisor for many of these companies. What do you if they are going to that next round? What are the things you advise them and to either look for and or watch out for?
On the company side or on the capital side?
Well, why don't you hit both?
Okay. On the company side, we try to prepare them very, very early on for scalability. So we have a network, and also it's interesting, you mentioned earlier the people coming to us. Every day we have other seed funds, Series A funds, and beyond that come to us looking for deal flow. What companies do you have, where they are currently, et cetera? How quickly do they scale? Do you have anyone in the ARV space that's looking for additional capital that has existing, is beyond proof of concept, et cetera, et cetera? So there we put the focus very early on the ability to scale, on the ability to build a solid team, because as you know, in the early innings, you may have a solo entrepreneur or a small founding team. And by definition, technology is scalable and humans are not.
Right.
So, you have to really focus on teaching them what it takes to build a winning team. And it's not someone else who will be patting you on the back, or if you have a founding team, as we so often have, of 2 or 3 highly skilled engineers, it may make sense that you start thinking of bringing on a VP of sales or VP of marketing, someone who could, to bounce things off, that counterbalances you and actually gets you ready for scalability when it comes time to really sell your product or your service to the masses.
Yes.
So I think what we're seeing is actually, in this ecosystem, is the skill set and the consulting that we're providing has been around for many, many years. If I remember going back to 1993, the first time I pitched an investor, I was very excited and I lost him within 10 minutes. He literally fell asleep in front of me because I was being too geeky talking about my project. And then I figured I might as well shut up and let him speak. And then he did the same to me. He was talking about funding rounds. I had no idea if he was talking about pre-seed, Series A, and I had no idea at that time what that meant. And I think what you're still having today is you're having this gap between capital and startups. It's less pronounced than it was 25 years ago, but it's still very much in existence. And I call it the expectation gap. And the easiest way to explain it is that entrepreneurs looking for funding are pitching on FM while the investor is listening to AM. Right. So there is a complete disconnect between one and the other. And what I do see is you have now, fortunately, more and more formerly startup technology entrepreneurs turned angel investors that are starting to bridge that gap via ecosystems like ours, via incubators, via VC funds, via early stage funds. And they have a tendency to move quick. Right. The last deal, for example, that I funded within 2 hours.
Wow.
I've never done this before. It actually happened last week. It's in the blockchain industry applied to music. And I was absolutely stunned by how far ahead these guys were already in terms of proof of concept. They had built a whole community of musicians waiting, because obviously if you look at the music industry, you're in Los Angeles, you know something about it. Yes, it's been wildly disrupted already since the 90s. But when you're really looking at record labels signing on artists, independent labels, there's still a tremendous amount of friction. Yes. And the artists themselves, some of which have massive networks of influence, hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, or even millions for some of them, they're still at the mercy of a label trying to sign them when they actually have the real power. Yes. Now, with the right utility token, with the right currency, parallel currency, decentralized finance is providing a real answer to these friction points where they no longer have to be part of this, for lack of a better term, scam.
Yeah. So this company was so far ahead that you would just like,
I said, look, I read through their white paper. I did some validation points. Usually when a group of founders has every answer to every question I throw at them, a red flag was being raised.
Right.
In this case, it was exactly the opposite. I mean, everything I asked for, instantly I had a screen share in front of me showing me how it worked and how they had solved the problem already.
Love it. And I assume, for most investors I know, in addition to obviously, testing out the concept, the idea, where they are and whether it's technology or otherwise in terms of market advantage, how much do you look at management when you're investing?
So I look at management first and foremost, and but probably for a different reason. Clearly, we all know that we need sound management in a company that ultimately intends to succeed. But for us, it's even more important because we actually live with these people 7 days a week. So I haven't gone fishing in 25 years, but the first question I ask myself is, would I go fishing with that person?
Right.
And if the answer is no, frankly, I turned 50 not too long ago. I don't have the patience anymore. I don't want to put up with this for, and sit next to this person for the next 5 to 7 years, which is the amount of time it usually takes to take a venture to become ultimately successful.
Right. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So as we get to winding down here, last couple of questions I'll have for you. Any other just things that come to mind in terms of, I know we've covered so much, we could talk for hours on this topic, especially with your experience. But anything else, you think would be valuable to the audience, maybe trends you're seeing right now, or, things that are, anything that comes up? Yeah.
Probably what I would leave them with is a definition of failure that's probably different than most definitions you've come across. The U.S. is probably an outlier when it comes to accepting failures, but if you go to other places in the world, Southeast Asia or even Europe, failure is almost like looked at as a stigma. In fact, for many years in France, if you had a failed venture, you weren't able to open up a bank account for 8 to 10 years. Now, that's fortunately gone now, but that gives you an idea on what actually failure meant and how it was looked upon. What I developed over the years is a philosophy where I actually embrace failure, because I've realized in my own career that failure is nothing but a stepping stone to success. And I developed my own little rule that I call the rule of 36/1. And that rule came about when I was my early 20s, moved to the US from France, and I started selling websites. Before they were built, we were actually building the websites and selling them to businesses in a time when selling websites was like selling ice to Eskimos. People didn't know what the internet was, and they thought it was a fad. You remember those times.
Of course.
Why do I need a website, et cetera, et cetera? And it took me 36 real pitches, live pitches, to actually sell one of those darn websites. So I was failing 95 to 98% of the time, yet I sold that business for large 7 figures a few years later, right? So I was able to parlay what were overwhelmingly failures into ultimately a success. And I think we should not forget that, because most people tend to give up way before them.
Yeah, love that. So people, Dom, if people want to find out more about the various things you have going on, what's the best place for them to go to for more information?
Easiest way is to go to UNIQORN, That's unicorn with a Q. Again, play on words on the unicorn, which is obviously a technology company that's worth $1 billion US or more, and my last name Einhorn, which means unicorn in German. My email is dom@unicornincubator.com. I'm also the only Dom Einhorn on LinkedIn. That's DOM as in Mary. Einhorn is spelled EINHORN.
You are the only Dom Einhorn on LinkedIn. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Not that it's a super common name, but you would think somebody's got to have it on LinkedIn, right? That's amazing. That's great. What great branding. Listen, so normally here I go to my last question, but I'm going to throw one more in here because in our prior conversation, you described to me where you are in Charlotte, France, and what it's like, and I can't let you get off this program. So I will have a last question after this. but I want you to give the audience a little view of where you are geographically.
Yeah. So we're the southwest of France, halfway between Bordeaux, the wine region on the west. We're 2 hours east of Bordeaux, and south of us is the city of Toulouse, known for Airbus primarily. Very, very developed in the tech space. But the region where we're in is very unique. It's a small town of 9,000 people roughly in the winter, with 2.5 million tourists during the summer months. It's the 7th most visited town in France, and it also has the highest density of medieval castles anywhere in the world. We have 1,002 castles in a 25-mile radius. Wow. Amazing food, amazing wine, river rafting, rock climbing. It's just pristine nature. In fact, for those of you who have seen the movie Joan of Arc by Luc Besson, it was filmed right here downtown. When they filmed it, the only thing they did is move the cars out. Everything else stayed the same. And about 8-10 months ago, Ridley Scott filmed his last movie here called The Last Duel with Adam Driver and Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. They were here for a couple of months as well.
I love it. Listeners, I already told Dom that when, to expect me as a visitor once COVID is over and we can travel, because it sounds like such an amazing place. My wife has been wanting to get back to south of France generally anyway, and it just sounds beautiful, and Dom tells me it is, and I can't wait to go.
Perfect timing would be in October when we're launching the Startup Supercup.
There we go. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you spend a minute on Startup Supercup, and then I'll ask you my last question.
Sounds good. So Startup Supercup is a technology event. You can find out more at startupsupercup.com. It will bring together between 1,000 and 1,200 people. We're 8 months out from the event. We have over 800 people pre-registered. Roughly 800 to 900 angel investors and investment funds, between 100 and 120 technology startups at the seed stage or slightly beyond, and then very strong media representation, financial media, startup media from the UK, from the US, from Canada, France, Germany in particular, and the rest of the world. It will be, startups will be pitching in front of the investment community. There will be numerous prizes, incubation packages being given away to specific category winners. The grand winner will also walk away with a unique trophy that will be a wood carving by a world champion chainsaw sculpture of a unicorn. So he'll produce it on premises. So it'll be very interesting.
Oh, I love that. It sounds amazing. All right, I am seriously going to do my best to get there. Assuming I think we're going to be able to be traveling by then. So that's great. So Dom, my final question on the podcast is about freedom, which is my highest value in life. And for me, it means everything from freedom from all people, from oppression and discrimination to, the reason I'm an entrepreneur, and I haven't had a boss in, 30 years. So what does freedom mean to you, and how does it apply to your business and life?
Yeah, I think you're 100% right. I think it's one of the reasons why I actually decided to move to a smaller place, into a rural area. My definition of freedom, is probably peace of mind. I was looking for more peace of mind. If you're a creative person, or even if you're not a creative person and you want to be more creative, probably one of the easiest ways to do that is to figure out what's draining your mind and to get away from that. In my scenario, since I was living in Los Angeles for upwards of 20 years, I wanted to get away from traffic primarily. That was stressing me out, from smog, from a certain type of people, sometimes all people. Yes. And I wanted to be in a place where I could just enjoy life in general, while still doing what it is that I love to do, which is to build businesses or help startup entrepreneurs build their own dreams.
Love it. And you're doing it, man. So that's awesome.
Thank you very much, Corey.
Dom Einhorn, thank you so much for being an amazing guest on the DealQuest podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of DealQuest, where we help you understand how deal-driven growth can be your ticket to freedom. I want to invite you to a unique way to tap into the wisdom and experience of the DealQuest community. Join the DealQuest Deal Den Zoom calls, a free monthly 90-minute mastermind. In the Mastermind, we address all the challenges you may be facing and help support you with the opportunities that may arise in terms of deal-driven growth. You will get input not only from me, but all the members on the call will collaborate and serve each other in a mastermind format. To sign up for the free mastermind, go to www.corykupfer.com/dealden. That's corykupfer.com/dealden. I'll see you there. I'm Corey Kupfer. Until next week, wishing you the freedom and financial prosperity that I know your DealQuest will bring.